You are listening to the Psychexperience.
Hello and thank you for listening to another episode of the Psychexperience podcast. The topics I present here, as raw as they may seem, are usually the result of some conversation I have with someone in our field. In a sense, this is the final product of some fencing from an intellectual perspective. And I do that for two reasons. One is to make sure that my questions and ideas were challenged enough before I present them, and the other one is to have some proofreading also before I bring it up. So that may cost me some friendships, but it's part of the business. So here's one of the questions that I've been working on for a while and asking my colleagues. Let's say you have been feeling down, your sleep is not that hot, energy level, motivation, all down. Then you're offered quetiapine by your doctor. Then you think weight gain, cognitive side effects, sedation, increasing cholesterol, risk of diabetes, movement disorders. Probably going to kill your sex drive and comes with some brain shrinking side effects. Increased risk of dementia and shortens the lives of chronic users. Would you take it? How about your son? Would you give Seroquel or Risperdal, for example, to your teenager son if he starts behaving wild? You have seen the effect of chronic use of antipsychotics. Now, while meta-analysis suggests up to 30% of tardive dyskinesia, you and I know that number is probably higher, meaning, much more than 30% of your patients taking antipsychotics, let's say for 10 years or more, actually have TD. How about obesity and cognitive slowing? Would you prescribe that to your child? If you answer to those questions, yes, then power to you. You keep doing what you're doing. However, if your answer is no, and I know most likely it is no because I've been asking this question a lot for a long time to a ton of folks in our field. So back to it. If your answer is no, and your patients are still accepting it when you offer, it is most likely because the amount of knowledge you have about this medication is not being communicated to your patients. It's because your patients are not entertaining all the risks that you entertain. So this is what a conversation with a hypothetical patient would go. Here, Ms. Smith, you have tried a couple of stuff for low mood or insomnia, nothing is working. There's this other stuff here, but I would stick to the insomnia and low mood if I were you. Why? Because it's going to cause this, and that. Now, during my conversation with my colleagues, the balance between risk and benefits frequently comes up, and also the idea of individual agency, meaning what will the patient want? Because after all, the patient is the one suffering and taking the meds. So to address that, I was forced to look into the research that claims that a given medication works. So I elected again quetiapine, because if we know that something works very well, then we can actually weigh it against the risks. But first we have to sort of find out how well it works. So let's see if we know how well Seroquel or quetiapine works. So I look into quetiapine for depression first, and the first thing that pops is an article by Olver and collaborators that shows that augmentation with quetiapine is the bomb and had no meaningful cognitive side effects. I'll repeat it. It says that it had no meaningful cognitive side effects. If that statement alone is not sufficient to dismiss the result of the paper, claiming that quetiapine has no meaningful cognitive side effects, then consider this. The research was sponsored by AstraZeneca, which is the company that owned the brand Seroquel. Then I researched quetiapine and bipolar, and I found quetiapine for acute bipolar depression, a systematic review and meta-analysis by Sutajit and collaborators. This is a Thai study. This is a meta-analysis, right? The results again, quetiapine is amazing for bipolar depression. The main author got some sponsorship from AstraZeneca again. But because it was a meta-analysis, I decided to look into the studies that were included in the meta-analysis. 3 were performed by AstraZeneca itself. One other study had Calabrese as main author, was titled Randomized Double-Blind Placebo-Controlled Trial of Quetiapine in the Treatment of Bipolar 1 or 2 Depression. This study showed superiority of quetiapine over placebo. The study received a grant from AstraZeneca. Another one of the studies included in the meta-analysis had McElroy as first author, called a double-blind, placebo-controlled study of quetiapine and paroxetine as monotherapy in adults with bipolar depression. It was also supported with grants of AstraZeneca. Another one that also shows quetiapine is better than placebo had Suppes, or Supes, I don't know how to say that, Suppes as first author, and was titled Effectiveness of the Extended Release Formulation of Quetiapine as Monotherapy for the Treatment of Acute Bipolar Depression. Beats placebo, again funded by AstraZeneca. By now you must be realizing that our meta-analyses are only as good and unbiased or biased as the individual studies included in them. So I decided to look into quetiapine for generalized anxiety disorder, because I know it's frequently prescribed. So I found quetiapine monotherapy in acute treatment of generalized anxiety disorder. A systematic review and meta-analysis of randomized controlled trials. The author is Manitum and collaborators. It's another Thai study. The main author got grants from Pfizer, but the main author was part of the meta-analysis on the bipolar study. And the main author of that study, of the one that received grants from AstraZeneca, was also part of this one. So let's look into the studies listed in this meta-analysis. First, that shows that quetiapine is better than placebo by Bandilow. It's called Extended Release Quetiapine Fumarate, or quetiapine XR, a once-daily monotherapy effective in generalized anxiety disorder. Data from a randomized, double-blind, placebo, and active controlled study. Financed by, any guesses? AstraZeneca. Another one by Kahn, named a randomized double-blind study of once-daily extended-release quetiapine fumarate, also quetiapine XR, monotherapy in patients with generalized anxiety disorder. Any guesses what I found under funding for that study? So then I said, maybe, let's look into PTSD. Efficacy of quetiapine monotherapy in post-traumatic stress disorder. A randomized placebo-controlled trial by Villarreal and Hamner and collaborators. So Hamner is the correspondence author and received grants from Abbott, AstraZeneca, Bristol Myers Squibb, Eli Lilly, Forest Laboratories, Janssen, Lundbeck, Organon, Otsuka, Sanofi Syntelabo, and the paper was initiated with grants from AstraZeneca. Back to quetiapine as augmentation for antidepressants, because we know that practice is very frequent. I found a review of quetiapine in combination with antidepressant therapy in patients with depression by Daly and Trivedi that shows that quetiapine helps depression. Then, regarding disclosures, we have the following list for the second author. Consultant for AstraZeneca, Abbott, Bayer, Bristol Myers Squibb, Eli Lilly, GlaxoSmithKline, Janssen, Johnson & Johnson, among others. By now you know what I have found when I checked the articles reviewed on the study. So we have to ask ourselves, do we even know what those medications do? Do we have any more than empirical evidence supporting their use? Considering everything we saw here, can we really state it works or state how well it works? For the sake of this exercise that we're making here, let's assume the disclosure tab was empty in all those articles above. We're going back 20 years, right, in time, maybe 30. No disclosures, and there was no bias. Let's assume no bias. Is the observable impact enough of quetiapine to justify the risks of using it? In other words, would you take quetiapine for low mood? How about for insomnia? Now, quetiapine has some meaningful anticholinergic side effects. As a result of that, should be a risk factor for dementia in case, dopamine activity was not enough. And if you want to learn more about the anticholinergic, check the episode with Dr. Byers. In summary, and the point I'm trying to make is, do we know what we need to know to answer the question, do the benefits outweigh the risks? If we're not really sure of the benefits, meaning, does it really work? Now, am I saying don't prescribe it? I'm not sure. I'm sure, however, that a decision to start a medication is a way more complex one than we were led to believe in our training. And while our field does not attend to those questions, we have to share our doubts and concerns with our patients and focus on less damaging ways to help them. Thank you for listening to the Psychexperience, a podcast offered by New England Psychiatry Mentoring Institute. As you know, all these questions are explored and discussed before I present. Please feel free to email us at info@nepmi.org. Share your thoughts, questions, criticisms, and ideas.